Chairman Mao, Jamie Howe, Ho Chi Minh, Asif Din, Václav Havel, Graham Saville, No Surrender, Percy Fender, Guerilla Cricket.
Good morning, good afternoon, good dawn, good dusk, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Guerilla Cricket. I'm Guerilla Hendo, Nigel Henderson, and alongside me today for this really special podcast is fellow Guerilla commentator Tony Bishop, and the biggest name ever to grace the Guerilla airwaves, although Gladstone Small might have something to say about that. A man who scored more than 27,000 runs in international cricket, captained his country to 48 wins in 77 matches at the helm, and presided over some of England's most painful moments down under. Yes, Adelaide 2006, I'm thinking of you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's none other than Ricky Ponting. Hi, Ricky. Great to have you with us. Welcome to Guerilla Cricket. How are you?
I'm great, guys. How are you all doing?
Yeah, we're not doing too badly, although, of course, we're licking our wounds after what happened at the beginning of the week. Have you recovered from that first test yet? I mean, what an experience that was.
It's a very small world, mate. I mean, I've obviously in the Australian camp all week and I'm working in a heavily English commentary box for the last week and sat back for the first part of that game, sort of, first 4.5 days of that game, really just taking little prods in the ribs right the way through that test match. And right at the end of the game, the Aussie boys obviously did the right thing and got across the line. But when I say it's a small world, actually, the day after the game, played golf with Brendan McCullum. And we talked all things Birmingham, all things Test cricket, and it was great to catch up with him. Yeah.
Did he give you any insights as to what's likely to happen at Lords?
I don't think anything's going to change too much. Listening to him, I think they're pretty clear on the way that they want to play their cricket. With him and Ben, since they've been together, what they've been able to do with English cricket, but more importantly, I think world cricket. With the amount of people that were sitting back and watching and talking about last week's game is brilliant. And I know that they are thinking about that. They're thinking about what people think about the Test game and how can we make the Test match game more appealing to a lot of people, and how do we get viewers involved. And I mean, the television numbers through the week last week were absolutely through the roof. Whether it was Sky's numbers, I know, were astronomical, and obviously we had some people out from Australia doing the Channel 9 coverage, and the numbers back in Australia were huge as well. So, the anticipation for this series was massive. The contrasting styles between the two teams was something that everyone's talked about for a long time, and then to see it actually unfold and see two different ways and two different methods sort of come together over 5 days in Birmingham was unbelievably good to watch.
Was there a part of you that was pleased to see the traditional Test approach win out over the newfangled approach of Stokes and McCullum?
Well, only because it was Australia that was playing that way.
But generally not.
If it had been anybody else playing that way against Australia, I wouldn't have been that happy to see it. But I mean, it's refreshing. It's definitely refreshing to see the way that they're going about their cricket, and also listening to a lot of the messaging that's coming out about the way that they want to play. It's also good. But I think what we might see, though, I mean, I think England were unsure and a little bit nervous as to how that style was going to go against Australia, and was it going to stand up, and do we need to tweak anything to try and beat this very good Australian team? And I think we will see both teams probably make some little tweaks to the way they play their cricket in the second test at Lords. So that's once again what's so intriguing about this series. I think the conditions will be different at Lords than what we saw in Birmingham. England have probably got a few selection headaches they've got to work out as well. There's no way in the world that Moeen Ali can play again after what we saw with his finger. They'll probably talk about their keeper as well. Johnny Bairstow made some errors last week, but I've got a feeling that Brendan will want to keep him in the side because he offers so much with the bat. But England have probably got a few more questions to answer after Birmingham than the Australian team do.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Pat Cummins, because he's a player that well, certainly I, and I think the rest of us on Guerilla Cricket, admire greatly. I mean, from the very start of his career when he burst onto the scene, and then the injury troubles that he has, and of course going back to the India tour, he had to go back from the India tour because he had his mother was very unwell. I mean, amazing that he could come out and perform like that. I mean, you probably know the guy quite well. I mean, what has he been going through?
Yeah, I know Pat really well. I actually handed him his baggy green cap as a 17-year-old in Johannesburg a number of years ago now. So, you know, I played a bit of cricket with Pat. I've watched him develop as a player and as a leader certainly as a leader over the last couple of years now. Yeah, I mean, things have been tough for him. You know, I think we quite often forget about what you know, these guys go through. We see them on the field, we see them playing their cricket, we make judgments about them as people and cricketers when we don't really know, you know, what's actually happening in their personal life. So Pat's, you know, he's had a tough time. You know, his mother passed away, and he had 3 months off cricket before the World Test Championship final, and I think, you know, I commentated that game, and I saw him bowling in that game. He looked like he was a long way off his best and a long way off where he needed to be. I think he bowled 10 no balls in that game, which is more than he's bowled in his last 10 Test matches combined. So, you know, it was obvious that he was lacking a bit of rhythm, but it didn't take long for him to get it back. I mean, everyone will remember his batting in the last innings of that Test match. But if you wind the clock back another day, he got 4 wickets in England's second innings as well. And as we know with Pat, they're always big wickets too. He gets the big players out. And, you know, they bowled England out for 270, and if they'd have gone on to get 300 plus, then it might have been a different result. So, you know, everyone should think about his all-round game, leadership, batting and bowling, and it'll go down in Ashes history as one of the great Test matches.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the time that we thought there's something special happening here was when he got rid of Ollie Pope. I mean, that was almost an unplayable delivery, wasn't it?
Yeah, and he's been working on that particular ball for a long time. I mean, the people that haven't watched Pat bowl much you've probably not seen him swing the ball ever. He's more of a seam bowler, running, hit a line and length, and, you know, use his scrambled seam deliveries. But he has been working on that particular ball. He bowled it a couple of times in Australia a couple of years ago when India were out.
Right.
A big hooping in swinger, and he generally tries to bowl it as a Yorker, and he got it spot on to Pope the other day, and it was too good for him. So he's a very skillful individual, no doubt about that.
It was kind of odd because we hadn't seen much movement out there at all, had we? And then suddenly he just got hold of the ball and produced an absolute worldie from nowhere, it seemed. Yeah,
it was a bizarre game as far as conditions were concerned. I mean, Australia got those conditions, was it late on night, day 3? When cloudy and the lights came on and the ball started to move around a lot. And the interesting thing for me, which was a bit of a topic of debate in the commentary box late on day 5, was, you know, around England taking the new ball or not.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the old ball was hard to score with, but it was also less likely to get a wicket. When England did take that second new ball late on day 5, we thought that it would present some easier scoring opportunities, and it did, but we also felt that there would be a better chance of getting some wickets. But it actually didn't swing at all. The brand new ball right through that Test match in Birmingham didn't move. It wasn't until it got to sort of 15 to 20 overs old and the lacquer came off where the ball started to swing a little bit. And England didn't have enough time in the game to get to that stage where it would start to swing.
Yeah, we've been saying that it doesn't seem to swing until a few overs have gone by. I suppose the other thing that was interesting about that was how, as you say, whether to take the new ball. And the fellow commentators were here. I wasn't on air at the time, but I was coming to the door and I was saying to people, "Don't take the new ball, don't take the new ball," because it looked to me as if, as you say, that lack of pace might have been what proved crucial. But it looks like, of course, then Joe Root stayed on, got that wicket of Alex Carey, and you know, after that, Patrick Cummins hit a couple of sixes, and everyone was laughing at me.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of that as well is when they did take the new ball, they opted not to give it to James Anderson, which was a little bit strange.
Do you think it was just because he'd just seen a little bit off colour in this Test? I mean, not quite the man that we know him to be.
Well, he said that as well, but if you watched him bowl, I mean, it didn't look like he was that much off the mark. You're talking about England's leading ever Test wicket taker. And an Ashes Test match on the line. I know where I'm throwing the ball. Well, I'm throwing the ball straight to him. I mean, if Glenn McGrath's in my side and he wasn't at his absolute best, I still know where I'm going. I'll give it to him because I know he'll get the job done more often than not, regardless of how good a touch he's in.
So your advice to Ben Stokes would have been to turn to Jimmy Anderson.
Oh well, mate, hindsight's a wonderful thing. It might have been the same result, but if you're just playing percentages, which I mean, as a captain, a lot of the time you have to just play the percentages and think about what's the most likely scenario here. Like if you look at, I mean, you can answer this question yourself. If you know who's more likely to get you a Test match wicket, James Anderson or Ollie Robinson, I know which one I'm going to. Yeah,
very, very, very fair point. Now let's move on from the Test match. We'll probably return to it as we go through the interview. But let's talk about well, one of the reasons that we're here is because you've now got your own wine label, which we are proudly drinking and showing off to various people. Now, the first one that we've got here is the Mowbray Boy Pinot Noir. Tell us about your journey into wine, how you got into it, and how you've come to have your own wine label.
Well, firstly, you're making me very jealous. I'm sitting there watching you drinking wine. I'm sitting here with a big bottle of water beside me. This is not the way it's supposed to be.
This is Guerilla, mate. This is Guerilla, mate. Come on in. Come and join us.
I was going to say, next time I'll do this in studio rather than...
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Our journey into wine. Well, I mean, my wife and I are both avid wine drinkers, if you like. You know, through my playing career, you know, I was lucky to travel, you know, lots of different countries around the world. I'll rewind it. I was actually introduced to wine mainly through my wife. You know, my background and upbringing in the northern suburbs of Tasmania, Launceston, on the, you know, almost brought up on the wrong side of the tracks, if you like.
Yeah.
I wasn't sitting around the dinner table having a glass of Pinot with my dinner. That's for sure. It was very much a barbecue and a beer sort of upbringing that I had. But you know, once I, you know, played a lot of cricket for Australia, a lot of the more senior guys in the team would have a couple of beers at the end of the day's play, and then move on to a glass of wine. You know, I met my wife, and she sort of she was a wine drinker, and so early days when we were dating, I'd take her out for dinner and look on the wine list and try and find the most expensive bottle of wine and try and impress her. And me not knowing anything about it, you know, to be a Margaret River Chardonnay or something, to be a couple of $100 that I'd have to fork out for dinner to try and impress her. But that's where it started. And you know, through the years now, I mean, I've been retired 11 years, and we've been together for about 22 or 23 years. It's been a really fun journey to go on. As I said, the countries that we travel to, the regions we go to, sampling different wines from different areas, and then to start our own business nearly 4 years ago now, it has been an incredible thing to do together. That's the point with this. It's a passion project for both of us. We both love wine, but we're also very passionate about this brand, and people need to understand that it is us. It's Rihanna and I. We're the major shareholders in the business. It's not, you know, we're not being paid to put our name on someone else's wine. This is our business, and we work on it every day. And we, so far, as I said, nearly 4 years in, we've loved the journey.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, as soon as I knew that you had this wine, I was thinking, oh, great, I've never heard about Tasmanian wine, generally speaking. You know, we talk about the Australian areas that are known, the Hunter Valley, Barossa Valley, various places like that. But you have, it's not a complete Tasmanian wine setup, but there are a couple of Tasmanian wines in that. And the Mowbray Boy, it's the first one that I'm holding up to the camera to show people. That's the first one we're talking about. Why did you feel that you wanted to represent where you were brought up? It's just something that you felt that's where you learnt your cricket and that's the community that you were in?
Yeah, it was the first thing I said to our winemaker and my other business partner, David Krenich, is that I want to be able to tell story through the brand as well. You know, I want to be able to tell stories about me, my life, my upbringing, obviously a bit about cricket, and tie all these stories in together. So, you know, being a very passionate Tasmanian, and you know, I wanted to have those Tasmanian wines in the range. So we've got the 3 Tasmanian wines in the range now, the 2 Pinot Noirs and a Chardonnay, and we're about to. There's a Pinot Gris. It's about to be bottled as well. That we'll include into the range, which will be sold exclusively in Tasmania. But yeah, the Mowbray Boy. I mean, storytelling. If you asked anyone in Tasmania to describe me, the first thing they would say, "Oh, he's a Mowbray Boy."
Right.
You know, that Mowbray is my local cricket club. It's the suburb that I sort of spent my early teenage years in. And that's just how I'd be described. So, but as I said, the upbringing that I had, I don't think there'd be too many guys at the Mowbray Cricket Club that I grew up with that would ever have thought that I'd have my own wine range. Let's put it that way.
Will they be drinking it now, though? Have you converted them?
A couple, yeah. They're pretty hard to shift away from a BB can. Let's put it that way. No, it's the feedback we've had. And it's, you know, it's great that I've got that sort of support in my home state. I mean, it's people, a lot of people from Tasmania, I'm sure, even though we've got 9 or 10 different wines in the range, the Tasmanians are that parochial that they'd probably only buy the Tasmanian stuff and drink the Tasmanian stuff. So, it's certainly been well received in my home state.
Talking of Tasmania, I visited there during the 2006-7 tour, and it was a lovely place to go. I really enjoyed it. I went to Hobart. I went out on the Southern Ocean, and it was superb. But with your roots there, have you ever felt that Tasmania has missed out in regards of being part of the Australian summer or Test summer? I mean, it always seems disappointing to me that there quite often isn't a Test. I know there was in the last Ashes, but quite often there hasn't been a Test there.
Well, yeah, there was in the last Ashes, but that was by default as well, remember, because they couldn't go to Perth. It was Perth couldn't host the game. So that was the only reason that game was moved from Perth down to Hobart. And it ended up being a night game too down there.
Yes.
So with a pink ball, which they'd never done before. Look, I do sometimes get a little bit disappointed that Tasmania hasn't been able to host more international games. But there are only so many games that can be played in Australia, and there's a lot of venues, and there's probably a few other venues in Australia that would say the same thing, that they feel like they're a bit starved. I mean, Canberra's probably another good example. You've got a terrific ground in Canberra, and I've been on the front foot for a number of years, and even when you talk about that Hobart Test match, I was very much on the front foot then. When it didn't look like it could be Perth, then I was on the front foot, basically demanding that it had to be Hobart.
I imagine your opinion carried a fair bit of weight.
Well, I'm not sure. It ended up being played there, so I guess it must have had something to do with it.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to what the Ashes is, which is the Pinnacle, and Tony's going to ask you some questions about the Pinnacle, McLaren, Vale, Shiraz.
Yep. I can tell you we've done a couple of wine tasting evenings with your wine, Ricky, and the Pinnacle's gone down particularly well. You might be pleased to know. Well, obviously, what a first Test match. Do you still get the same tingle from the commentary box, or is it just a different tingle when you're watching an Ashes game not playing?
No, there's a tingle, absolutely, but it is a slightly different tingle. I mean, what I was going through with the microphone in hand the last 20 minutes compared to the tingle that Pat Cummins would have been feeling when he was out in the middle, I think they're slightly different. But and I said it was that game was. There's so many eerie resemblances to the 2005 game that I played in, and we unfortunately lost by 2 runs. I mean, the first day of the 2005 game, England made 407. Yeah, have a guess how many runs were made on day one of this Test match? 407.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. Yeah,
England declared 393. Australia were none for 14. 407 day one. How many did Australia require going into day 5?
It was 174, wasn't it? No, it was 174, I think.
Yeah, it will have come down to from 187 to 174, I think, yeah.
Yeah, but what does that equal if you add them all up? What were they chasing?
Hang on, who's interviewing who? He's plying us with his wine, and now he's asking us tricky questions.
Arithmetic is not our strong point, I think you'll find at Gorilla, generally.
I think there was one run difference of what Australia needed to chase.
Yeah.
Last week than there was in 2005. It was an incredible game of Test match cricket with so many similarities. So, yeah, the tingle is definitely still there. Although when it was getting tight, I felt like going and hiding out the back of the commentary box and just waiting for either the wickets to fall or the runs to be scored. But as it turned out, I did about an hour 15, I think, commentary stint. Normally our commentary stints are about 30 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
We did the same thing, actually.
Yeah, I think we did, absolutely. Yeah, it was just so engrossing, wasn't it?
I can tell you one of our fellow commentators was tingling, but that was probably because he was on his 10th glass of Pinnacle when he was helping us call that last session.
Yeah. Sky wanted me on for the end of the game. So they brought me in when Kerry got out 8 wickets down, thinking the game was going to be over, and here I am an hour and a quarter later still sitting there calling the winning run. So, no, look, I loved it, and the guys that I work with, you're calling with Nasser and Athers and those guys, two great broadcasters. So to be on at the end of a game like that, and I was on at the end of the Headingley game last series as well when Stokes got England across the line. So I've been able to call some really special moments in Test history.
Yeah. Do you think the way Ricky England are playing is genuinely different? Now, the reason I ask that is Test captain, you won, I think, 48 Tests out of 77. And I recall the late Rod Marsh once saying, if you can't score 300 in a day, you might as well go home. So there was that kind of aggressive desire to put runs on the board early that was baked into your teams. Have England just kind of accelerated that a bit? But essentially, it's a similar principle.
Yeah, Rod Marsh told me that as a 15-year-old boy, straight out of year 10.
Yeah.
out of Launceston over to the Cricket Academy in Adelaide. And the first chat we had as a group, he sat us all down as batters and said, "Right, boys, I can see where this game's going. If you're not good enough to score more than 300 runs in a day, then I don't want you here." So what we were trying to find, and I think, to be totally honest, I think this is where Test match batting has probably changed a little bit in the last little period of time. It's so the year that I came through and the teams that I played in with Hayden and Gilchrist and Martin and these sort of guys, Michael Clark, Mike Hussey, guys that were naturally aggressive players. The batting philosophy, and certainly the way that I played, I was naturally an aggressive player, but that was the way that I was taught. It was, how do I score runs really quickly here without getting out? So you're always on the edge of taking risk. But how do I do that without getting out? Now, if I look back to the England team, if you look at the England team that came to Australia a couple of years ago with the guys that they had at the top of the order, it wasn't about scoring runs at all. It was about not getting out first, and then if I make some runs at the end of the day, then great. It's almost about taking every little bit of risk out of the equation, hanging around, wearing the bowlers down, picking up ones and twos and the occasional boundary and scoring runs that way. So it's been refreshing to watch England play, but I definitely think, Brendan. I know Brendan really well. I've known Brendan for, 20. No, probably 30, nearly 30 years actually, and it's no surprise to me that they're playing that way. And our best teams, we probably scored at close to 4 runs and over. This team scoring at close to 5 runs and over, which is remarkable in Test cricket.
Well, no, look, the Pinnacle McLaren Vale Shiraz, it's called the Pinnacle because it represents the Ashes and your fantastic association with the Ashes. You won more tests than you lost in the Ashes. Not so series. Does that still rankle, or is life just too short and there's too much else to look forward to?
You know what? I didn't even know that. I didn't know that I'd won more than I lost. I'd probably, I would have thought that I'd won more than I lost. But the thing that does rankle me a little bit is the fact that I was captain in 2005 and 2009 in the UK that we weren't able to win. That still burns a little bit. But at the end of the day, I know that I did everything that I could. I know the players obviously did everything that they could to try and win those couple of series. And, as we all know, we talk about, this current England team sort of reinvigorating Test cricket around the world. Well, I think that 2005 series, even though we lost, I think that reinvigorated the game. But, I would have. At the end of the day, we all know as Australians and as English cricketers that your name and reputation is forged and created on what you do in Ashes cricket. And if I had have been able to win here as captain, then I'm sure my reputation in Ashes cricket would be a bit better than it is right now.
Well, we're going to stick on the Ashes, I think, because let's move on to another wine, which should be the Barossa Valley, another Shiraz, the 127.
Yeah, that's actually my favourite. That's my favourite wine in the range, actually, the Barossa one.
Well, maybe you can tell us a little about why. I mean, you made an immediate Ashes impact. It was 97 at Headingley, I think. An innings win for Australia, a huge triumph for you with a century in your first Ashes test. But it was another friend of our show, Jason Gillespie, had torn through England in the first innings. Was Dizzy just unplayable, or did England have a real shocker against him?
I think, what did he get, 7 or 8 for, didn't he? 8 for
he did.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, he's, I think, one of the most underrated cricketers that's ever played the game, Jason Gillespie. I say that all the time. I mean, I was lucky to play a lot with him, and that, he was young and fresh on the scene too. In 97, bowled fast, swung the ball, that Duke ball. He loved bowling with that Duke ball. And that 127. I mean, that particular wine that you're talking about that's part of what we call our milestone range. So that's sort of a it's a step up from our sort of not I'm not going to say entry level wine. None of them are entry level wines, but we're obviously a premium wine brand, and the Pinnacle Shiraz that you were talking about is that entry level sort of stuff on the bottom side, on the lower end of the premium range, and then we've got another step up, the milestone. So we've got the 127 there. My first Ashes 100 at Headingley, 127, first Ashes Test match. I thought it was appropriate to start there. When you think about milestones, I always think about the first time that you did something, whether it's your first test or your first 100 or whatever. So we landed on the 127 for that particular wine, and as I said, it's my favourite. I don't like saying it's my favourite because our winemaker's based in McLaren Vale, and this wine's actually from the Barossa. So Yeah, but it's definitely my favourite.
Well, we've been enjoying drinking it. That 127, by the way, you got a pretty decent lick as well. Going back to the discussion on the speed of getting runs on the board, it was only a shade over a run a ball from my recollection of things. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, I don't actually. The tour after, I reckon, as well, 2001, I made 100 at Headingley as well. I think I got 140 odd in that game. I know that was pretty much a run a ball, 100 in the 2001 series. I'm not sure about 97, but as I said, that was the way that I was brought up to play. You know, and I backed myself and I trusted myself, and my team wanted me to play that way. And when you play that way, you play well, you can set up games really quickly. So, you know, I was all about winning. It wasn't about how many runs I got or how many hundreds I got. It was about winning games, and that's the thing that I'm most proud of through my career is, you know, you talk about that captaincy record, but I played 168 tests and I think I won about 110 of them. So no one in the history of the game has won over 100 test matches, and I'm the only person that's done it. So that's what I'm most proud of.
Well, you said, by the way, on that, you had said you thought you'd played as well that day, which is your first Ashes test. I think it was your second overall test, but your first Ashes test. You said you played as well in that innings as you ever had done before or since. What was it? Can you sort of give us some more memories of what it was like in your first Ashes to take, you know, walk into the crease, getting a ton? That's a heck of an introduction to Ashes cricket. Tell us a little bit more about some of the memories of that day.
Yeah, well, I was one of the spare batters on the tour. I didn't play the first two. I think Headingley might have been the third test or the fourth test. Michael Bevan was in the side batting at six. He'd been dismissed a few times in a very similar way against the short ball in the first few games. And I think England had sort of exposed a bit of a weakness in Bev's armour at the time. And I'd made 100 the week before. We played a county game down at Glamorgan actually, and I made a really good 100 down there. And then they decided to leave Bevo out and give me a crack. And once I got that crack, then I wasn't going to let it go quickly, and I was going to make sure I went out and played my way. And I think it was second ball. Second ball, I think I'd pulled or hooked Dean Headley for 6 or 4 second ball of my innings, and I was away. And then in a partnership with Matthew Elliott made 199. Remember in that game as well. He was a good mate of mine and a very, very good player. I think we put on close to. It must have been close to 300 after being about 4 for 40 or 4 for 50. So lots of great memories. I mean, the atmosphere that's created around an Ashes Test match, around these great venues in England, you know, smaller capacity grounds, but they're as loud as anywhere in the world.
Well, Headingley sure has some history. That is for sure. And you selected the Barossa Shiraz to celebrate that first 100. Some of the fruit comes from a vineyard that's over 100 years old, which is pretty impressive. What else makes the wine special to mark your milestone? You said it was your favourite. Yeah,
well, what we've tried to do, and you guys probably know a lot about Australian wines and probably enjoyed lots of Barossa Shirazes in your time.
We have.
Yeah.
Bang on.
Well, you'll have an understanding then of a Barossa Shiraz and what it's all about. You know, how big and bold and, you know, heavy those Barossa Shirazes can be. And what we tried to do with this particular wine is make it. It was a more modern take on a Barossa Shiraz, if you like. So I didn't want it to be exactly the same as what you'd expect with a Barossa. We wanted it to be. It's a bit more between a McLaren Vale Shiraz and a big, heavy Barossa Shiraz. It's somewhere in the middle. So that was what we're trying to achieve. And I told Ben Riggs, our winemaker, that's what we wanted, and he absolutely nailed it. I think you'll agree that it's a lot softer on the palate.
It is.
Than a normal Barossa Shiraz, yeah.
It did very well in our wine tasting evenings, I can tell you that too.
Good. You're just making me more and more jealous. Can you? I'm staying at the Danubius. Can you make sure you send a few bottles around for me?
Well, hang on. If you have to ask for your own wine, Ricky, then I think you have to have a word with your management company, mate.
I'm going to have to.
But I know where you are because I know that very well. That hotel. Hendo, over to you, mate.
Yeah, let's move on. And you've mentioned already about the fact that it was your wife that got you into the wine, and I have to say I'm not a massive red wine fan, but I do like a rosé, and I am sitting here, and I've been sitting here all morning, well, not all morning, with a lovely Rihanna Fluoro Peninsula rosé. You're celebrating your wife. Why did you choose this particular wine to name after her?
Look, I tell a few stories and a few jokes about this right the way through. And the joke goes that she basically said to me, if we're going to do this together, then you better make sure my name's on one of the bottles of the wine. So
That's a very good. That's a very good idea. I think she was being very smart there, wasn't she?
Yeah, no, that wasn't the plan at all. In fact, she was that scared of having her name on the bottle in case it wasn't that the rosé wasn't that well received by her friends. That
Oh, really?
We almost didn't do it. A lot of her friends are big rosé drinkers, and once again with that, I mean, I'm like you, mate. I'm not a huge rosé fan. I like. Like most varieties, but rosé is not one that I would go to very often. But all the feedback we've had on that particular wine from people that are rosé drinkers has been particularly good. So you can tell by the colour. It's a bit bigger. It's not like a really light rosé. There's a bit more to it, a bit more about it, and that was what we wanted, and that's what we got. So it's been great. Yeah.
It's interesting when you first met her. She wasn't a cricket fan at all, was she? And she even clapped the wrong batsman coming onto the field, thinking it was you. Is that right?
Yeah, my last test. I had my whole family over there in Perth, and it was late in the second inning. One day 4 it must have been. We were batting, and we lost a wicket late. 10, 15, 20 minutes to go in the day. I was padded up, ready to go in, as was Nathan Lyon as a night watchman, and Michael Clark pushed Nathan Lyon out the door, and as he's walking onto the ground, Rihanna stood up and clapped him onto the ground, thinking it was me. So. No, she wasn't a cricket fan, and to be honest, she's a lot more of a cricket fan now since I've retired. But I'm in this coaching role with the Delhi Capitals in the IPL, and my kids just absolutely fallen in love with the Delhi Capitals and the IPL. They've adopted that team as their own. They love everything about it. So Rihanna's a lot more involved in the game now than ever before. I mean, the other story with her is when I retired, like the day after I retired, we're sitting back at home on the couch, and all the news reports are happening, and my career is sort of flashing up on the sports part of the news, and it's Ricky Ponting retires after 13,378 test runs, and she stops and she says, "Did you get 13,000 test runs?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "You were actually pretty good at that game, weren't you?" And then it flashes up again, he's distinguished one-day international career, 375 games, 13,000. And she said, "Did you get 13,000 one-day international runs as well?" So it wasn't until I until I retired that she actually had any idea what I was doing at all.
But does it? I mean, I wonder whether. I mean, we often see commentators, especially and writers, will talk about a guy who's been around the cricket scene for a while, and then suddenly say, well, they got married and they've matured, and suddenly they're a different guy, or woman if it was the other way around. How important is it for an international cricketer to have a stable home life and supportive family?
Oh, look, well, I only know one way. I only know that way. Yeah. I don't know what it would be like without that. I mean, it's a really strange life that you live and you lead as an international cricketer. You literally spend 10 or 11 months of every year out of your own home. That's the thing about cricket that's different than most other sports. I mean, you even think about the Australian summer. So if you live I live in Melbourne. If you live in Melbourne, the Australian summer starts in November, finishes in the end of February. If you live in Melbourne, you only play one game there for the summer. So you play the Boxing Day Test and maybe one day.
Yeah.
So the other 3 months you're actually somewhere else in Australia. You're not staying in your own home, and that's when you're in Australia. Let alone when you're away. And I guess it's actually probably getting worse now, to be honest. With more and more domestic T20 comps popping up all over the world, the players are spending less and less time at home. They're making a lot more money, but they're travelling a lot more and away from their family. But So when I was captain of the team, I basically demanded that wives and families were able to travel to any game that they wanted to.
Right.
And the one thing I loved seeing at the end of the Test match in Birmingham was the first thing I saw when I looked up at the change rooms. The families were in there 5 minutes after the game, and it was great to see.
Brilliant. We're going to move on to the Tasmanian Chardonnay. Let me find this on the floor beside me, and Tony's going to question you about this one.
Well, and the cricket as well.
Is that the one you've been drinking? You've been drinking that Chardonnay? I've noticed.
No, we didn't. We haven't had a chance to try this because it wasn't originally up, was it? Oh, you have tried it?
No, I've had some. I've had some.
All right.
It's full of citrus and stony fruits, and obviously it's Tamar Valley, right? Am I right? It's a Tamar Valley Chardonnay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we're sourcing grapes from all over the state at the moment, actually. So that particular wine there was all from the northern part of the state, from the Tamar Valley, but the thing about Tasmania, with how premium the wine and the grapes are down there, it's getting harder and harder for us to get the volume that we want. So we're sort of having to pick up little parcels from lots of different growers now to get the amount that we need. Yeah.
Well, it's the 140 Tasmanian Chardonnay, and I know our focus is probably very much on the Ashes at the moment, but 140, of course, was your 2003 World Cup final score at the Wanderers versus India. Got that at a very decent strike rate as well. So tell us a little bit more as to why you've chosen this particular Tasmanian Chardonnay to celebrate that particular milestone.
Well, it was probably more why I chose that particular number for that particular wine rather than the other way around. It was, once again, the Tasmanian wines that we've got, that Chardonnay and another the 257 Pinot that sits in that milestone range. So and it sort of has to the quality of wine coming out of Tasmania now is just unbelievably good. The volumes, as I said, are really low, so therefore the price is always going to be a little bit higher. But this particular Chardonnay, I talk about the milestones and more special moments and cricketing moments in my life, and it's hard to go past the first Ashes 100, and it's hard to go past the 140 in that World Cup final. That was my first World Cup as captain. I'd only been captain for about 6 months actually before that World Cup started. Warney, God bless him, missed that World Cup because of a failed drug test. Jason Gillespie played one game, was ruled out of the tournament with a heel injury or Achilles injury. So straight away then, the two of the bigger trump cards I thought I had and points of difference I had going into the tournament were gone, and we had to rely on Andy Bickle and Andrew Simons came into the side, and we know what Andrew Simons did first game against Pakistan, played one of the all-time great one-day international innings. So I mean, it's not. Whenever I think about that 140, it's not just necessarily what I did in that final. It was that entire World Cup that we went through the World Cup undefeated. We got 360 in the final against India, and were able to put them to bed pretty quickly when McGrath got satched out in the first over when they were chasing, and that was pretty much game over. So
you smacked 8 sixes in that innings, as I recall. You also shared a 234-run partnership with Damien Martin. So hopefully, of all people that should share a glass of the 140 with you, it should be him. Has he had a chance to sample it?
Most of the guys, mate. As soon as this wine label was launched, I haven't heard from a lot of the guys for 6 months, and then all I got was their name and address and where I had to send it to as soon as it was launched. So yeah, Marto. I mean, I was best man at Damien Martin's wedding. We're great mates. The thing to remember about that partnership as well with Marto is that I brought him back into the team for the final. He broke his finger about 2 weeks before that with a fielding drill. Broke his right index finger really badly, and he'd missed a few games. And I met him the night before we finished training. I went to him the night before the game because I don't think anyone expected him to play, and I was desperate for him to play because he's a big game player. And I went with him and sat with him, and I said to the coach, I said, look, I'm going to sit down with Marto. I'm going to look him in the eye. I'm going to ask him one really simple question. If he blinks at all or doesn't give me the answer that I want, then he's not playing. And I sat with him and looked him in the eye and said, mate, are you 100% right to go? And he looked at me and said, pick me, mate, I'm fine. So I picked him. He got 80-odd not out. If you watch the replays of that innings, the whole innings, you look at his bottom hand on the bat, his right index finger was off the handle pretty much that whole innings. But he got 84 in that. I think it was 84 in that partnership, and he was amazing. And
he has tasted the 140, so we're glad to hear that.
Yeah,
it was at the time the highest innings in a World Cup final, a record that only lasted 4 years, but at least it was another Aussie who broke it 4 years later, wasn't it? Wasn't it Adam Gilchrist?
Gilly in Barbados a couple of years later, and when I talk about Marto having a broken finger, Gilly actually did that. Remember, with a squash ball in his glove that no one knew about. He struggled right through the World Cup. He was hitting the ball poorly. His bottom hand grip was getting too tight. He couldn't keep control of the bat face, and he didn't tell anybody at all. He didn't practice with it. Didn't do anything. He puts a squash ball in the bottom of his bottom hand glove, so he couldn't grip the bat as tight with his bottom hand. And he goes out and gets 149. He brings up his 100. And he puts his arms up and raises his bat to the change rooms. And then he starts going like this.
Oh, right. And we got some film of that.
I'm saying to the 12th man, oh boys, Gilly needs gloves. Gilly needs gloves. It wasn't that at all. He had a squash ball in his glove that no one knew about.
I think was that when you got run out by Andrew Simons, didn't you? Was that game?
Wasn't that happy about that actually.
No, I suspect you probably weren't, but at least the win kind of made up for that, I guess.
Farcical win in the end as well. Remember, we finished in the dark. It was crazy finish to a World Cup final.
Well, we should move on. Hendo's leading us to the close of play now.
We are close of play, literally. I mean, I think
I've got this, and you guys are sitting there with that.
Yeah. Are you telling me that's not vodka?
A little bit early yet. I'll wait till I'm finished with you guys, and then that can start later now.
Okay, fair enough. The close of play. And I think your autobiography was called At the Close of Play, wasn't it? It's an incredible book which I've read over the last few months, and I have to say it's the most incredible. The detail in it is tremendous. I haven't seen in a lot of other cricket autobiographies. But let's talk about the close of play. The close of play is a Langhorne Creek Cabernet Sauvignon 2020. And just to sort of make it interesting, can you remember at which close of play you felt most satisfied or elated, or just generally chuffed?
That's a very good question. I mean, as I said, I was lucky to play in a lot of Test match wins. A couple of winning World Cups. Probably that 2003 World Cup change room at the end, sitting back there when you've got a World Cup trophy in your arms and you've got your mates with you. And obviously one of those mates that was with me there is not with us anymore. Warney started that tour with us, is not with us, and Andrew Simons. Is not with us now either. So that probably makes moments like that little bit more special. And then the other one you mentioned earlier was that amazing Adelaide 2006 Test, which, I'm not sure if you can be any more excited and happy with the way a Test match went than that one. And I'll tell you the reason why, because, you think back to 2005, we obviously lost in England. The knives were out for us, really. The knives were out for some of our more senior guys. They're too old. McGrath and Gilly and Hayden. They're past their best. Langer, these guys. The hunger's not there anymore. And we got back to Australia. We had a world famous now, basically SAS bush camp that we all went out for 3 or 4 days. No one knew where we were. We had a backpack and a pair of track pants and a t-shirt for about 4 days, and that was all we had. The boys got brought pretty bare, and emotions came out on that tour, and we won really well in Brisbane. First game, we go to Adelaide, England bat first and get 500, whatever they got. And the moment that England got 500 it was almost like everyone had forgotten about the first Test in Brisbane. It was like, here we go, England they're going to steamroll this team again. And I remember after. Actually, might have been after day 2, actually, because England would have batted most of the first 2 days. Got the boys together in the nets out the back, and I said, look, I'm sick and tired of hearing all this shit from the media about how good they are and how good we're not. And I said, each and every one of you now, if you play to the best of your ability for the next 3 days, if we play perfect Test match cricket for the next 3 days, we'll win this game. I'm telling you now. And we must have started our batting, because I said, I put my hand up and said, and I'll lead the way. I'll lead the way this morning. Jail and I will lead the way. We'll do our absolute best. You boys come on the journey with us, and we'll win the game. And we batted. We got 500 and something as well. And then we know what happened from there. England got bowled out for whatever it was, 140, 150 when they went on the absolute defensive late day 4, early day 5. We had a session to get about 140, 150, and we got them. And you just can't play a better Test match than that.
Well, I have to say that I was following that tour, and that was the worst day of my cricketing life as a spectator. Just to make you feel more cheerful, I had to go to Kangaroo Island the next day just to get over it.
That's a great spot, actually. Kangaroo Island.
It is a great spot. Fantastic. Let's just do a few rapid random questions to mark the close of play before we wind down. Just wondering.
Just go back to that close. It's the biggest. For me, the biggest sleeper in our range, because when Ben Riggs, our winemaker, said to me, he said, look, we're going to do a Cab Sav out of Langhorne Creek. And I'm like, why Langhorne Creek? Why aren't we doing, Coonawarra or McLaren Vale? Or why are we going? He said, trust me, this is the most underrated Cabernet Cab Sav region in the world, let alone in Australia. And I'm like, well, he's been doing it for 40 years. It's probably not for me to argue with him. And he made that's been a brilliant wine. That's been entered in. I think it's 8 different international wine shows, and it's won gold medal in every one. It actually never missed a gold medal in any show that it's been in. So it's been incredibly good for us.
Well, it's another one that's gone down very well in our wine evenings, I can tell you, at cricket clubs. Something to do with the cool maritime climate of the Langhorne Creek, I think, plays a part in that, and the Lake Doctor coming off Lake Alexandria, from what Ben was writing anyway.
Yeah, that's what Ben's put on the back of the bottle for sure. Yeah,
he knows. Well, I was actually reading it off the tasting notes, but yeah, it's probably on the back of the bottle as well. Yeah.
So that's where it's not for me to argue with him. Same thing with the Tasmanian Chardonnay. Actually, the Tasmanian Chardonnay, both my wife and I are sort of heavy, big, heavy, oaky Chardonnay drinkers, and that's actually quite hard to produce out of Tasmania. So when that first Chardonnay, that's actually the second, that one you've got there, that's our second crack at the Tasmanian Chardonnay. The first one that came out was sent to us in that green bottle, as you can see. My wife poured a glass of it and she looked at it and she says, that's not going to work for me. That's not what we're after. It's way too light. That's not a Chardonnay. And I rang Ben straight away and said, mate, the boss is not that happy with this. And he said, look, go and stick it in the cellar, leave it in the cellar for six months, go and get it and open it then. He said, I'll guarantee you it'll be completely different in 6 months, because it was such a young wine that he said it's just got to go away for a while. So we actually held off launching that wine for about 6 or 8 months, and then by the time we got it to market, it had changed massively.
Let's just you mentioned that it was how good it was to be in the box with Michael Atherton and Nasser Hussain. So that you kind of preempted that one of our questions was who's great to commentate with. Who's less great to commentate with? Are you willing to tell us some of the secrets of the commentary box?
Oh, I don't think there's no one less great to commentate with. I mean, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and I'm as well. I don't do any of the lead commentating roles. I'm not sure if you guys have ever picked up on that, but it's always Nas or Athers or Mel Jones or someone like that. The more, I mean, I say the more experienced commentators. I've probably been doing it for a while now, but I don't necessarily enjoy the lead stuff. I don't like talking a lot, and when you're in the lead, you have to talk a lot. So I'd rather sit in the expert chair and sit back and analyse, what's happening. Give myself a few minutes between things that I say to think about what's just happened or what's about to happen, or analyse or critique, technique and what's happening in the game. So I tell one funny thing. I turned up to the ground on day 5, and I did the lunch break on day 4 with Kevin Pietersen, and he was talking about how good Joe Root was and how dominant he was, and England were on top of the game, and I just and that completely without even thinking about it, I said, oh yeah, okay, yeah, good. Joe's out. He got 40. Let's move on, sort of thing. And it got like the way that social media took it. It was like it was the biggest shutdown of anyone in the history of commentary. I basically but it wasn't like that at all. Kevin and I are great mates, and I stayed with him all week. We stayed out at the Belfry all last week and taken off after every day's play. He drove me back to London after the game the other night. But the way it came across and the way you can sort of trim things up to suit what you like in the media, it made it look like it was a pretty personal thing, but it was far from that.
Yeah, I think you were described as the sharpest tongue in the commentary box when you said that to him, which is quite entertaining. Talking about humorous things that go on, who's the funniest player that you've played with? Funniest player you've played with?
Probably Simo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like just a great bloke to have around. I mean, once again, I said God bless Warney before. I mean, God bless Simo as well. I mean, I had a lot to do with getting him back into the team on that 2003 tour. John Buchanan and I had to work overtime with the selectors to actually pick him on that tour as one of the 15. We thought he'd be an extra and probably wouldn't play many games, and then we had a few blokes injured at the start, and he came in and we gave him some pretty clear direction of what we wanted him to do and how we wanted him to play, and he went away and did it. Like he was. You said I've got the sharpest tongue in the commentary box. Well, Simo probably wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but but if you gave him some pretty simple and clear direction, he'd go and do it for you, or he'd bloody near die trying to do it for you, and that's why we loved him so much. And T20 cricket, one day cricket, Test cricket. If I can pick a team, then Andrew Simons is in my team every day of the week.
Brilliant, great to know. It's just a left field one for you. I mean, the fact that you've been talking to Brendan McCullum and you've been, you said played golf with him the other day. If England ever asked, would you coach them?
I actually got asked before Brendan took the job. There you go.
Did you? Oh, wow, you've just given us a fantastic story.
What a scoop.
Thank you very much. Scoop from Ponto. Thank you very much. Or Punter, shall I say.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone... You might be the first guys that have ever found that out, but I did take some calls from Robert Key. As soon as he took over that job, I got some calls from him. I'm just not ready for a full-time international coaching job where I'm at in my life. You know, it's... I'm really content with what I'm doing with the commentary work I do with Channel 7 in Australia. That's sort of most of the summer months. My IPL coaching is about 3 months away in India, sort of April, May, June. And having travelled as much as I have while I was playing with young kids now, I just don't want to be away as much as I was before. And even talking to Brendan yesterday, he's been away about a month now. His family are actually arriving today, so they haven't been here the whole time that he's been coach of England. So that's difficult when you've got kids that are in school. Moving them around in and out. That's not what I wanted to do, and I'm happy doing what I'm doing now.
But on a technical level, would you have any objection to coaching England? Because you're so you would. Because I think there was also talk about Justin Langer, I think, as well around the time of Brendan's appointment.
Yeah, look, I love coaching. I mean, cricket's in my blood. It's what I talk about. It's what I've done. I love coaching, but I don't think I could coach another international team.
Brilliant. Oh, that's really interesting to say. I was going to say, would you take on another team? Now, we've had up in front of us the Women's Ashes that has just started this morning. Final question, really, for you. Are you going to take any of this series in? Are you going to get a chance to see the women and how they're progressing?
Yeah, we definitely will. I mean, we've been talking about it a lot through the Ashes coverage last week. It's obviously a huge series for women's cricket. I think it's vitally important that these two women's teams put on a great show over the next few weeks. And what Brendan's trying to do with the England team is trying to grow the Test game, and it's also vitally important that at every opportunity we try and grow the women's game in different countries as well. I mean, we need a strong India, we need a strong Pakistan, we need the West Indies to keep getting better. New Zealand they've always been a strong women's team, but there's more and more talk about more women's Test cricket, which I'd absolutely love to see, but it's getting the teams to the point where they're going to be good enough to play Test match cricket, and the only way they can do that is by promoting it more, and I think these two teams here have got a great opportunity to promote the game well this week.
Australia 50-1, just in case you were wondering what's going on at the moment. Finally, then, after winning the toss and batting, as Tony has alluded to, we're taking some of your wine out to these Ashes tasting evenings to help raise money for grassroots cricket clubs. £600 was raised for Winchmore Hill Cricket Club last week. How do you feel your wine is bringing through the next generation of England cricketers? How afraid are you?
That's great. It's to be the two passions in my life, right? Wine and cricket. A bit of Aussie rules footy, some golf, and some greyhound racing. That's about my life. But to be able to bring the wine into different markets and different countries is really exciting for us. I mean, we've also always known that the UK was potentially a really good opportunity for us. Obviously, India is the other market that we're breaking into and doing some really good things over there with, India becoming probably a lot more
Your
Westernized.
own store at Delhi Airport.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Duty free, yeah. So, no, it's terrific that if cricket clubs and, are buying my wine and that's helping youngsters and families out through the UK, then that's fantastic.
Brilliant. Have you got a final Ashes prediction? We're 1-0 Australia at the moment. Where do you see it going from here?
I said at the start I thought it'd be 3-2 to Australia. I can't see there's going to be any draws. I mean, without that loss of 40 overs on day 3 last week and about the same on day 5, that would have been a 4-day game as well last week. So I can't see too many. Without bad weather, I can't see too many going into 5 days or any draws. And I just think that Australia's, just with their experience, I think they're probably better balanced. I think their bowling attack is probably going to stand up better through these 5 tests than what the England one will. I think the England bowling attack, I think Wood will come back in. I think Wood will come in for the Lord's game. Yeah. So one of the others has got it. Well, actually, In fact, I don't think they'll play. They won't play a spinner. I think they'll play 4 quicks here.
Yeah.
5 quicks it'll be with Stokes, and I think Joe Root will end up being the spinner for him here. But if we get flat wickets like we had in Birmingham, then I can't see this English attack getting 20 wickets every game to win. So their batting's good, their batting's strong, they're bold, they're fearless, they're playing well. But I just think Australia's overall balance, experience, and depth they'll just pip England, I reckon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You're great. Your time. We just have one more favour to ask before you go. Would you, Tony, take over?
Well, first of all, I think what we should do is remind everybody, and it'll be rolling along the screen or very obvious as well when this recording goes out. But if you would like to try any of the fantastic wines, or buy any of the fantastic wines from the Ponting range, you can get them at a 15% discount courtesy of Guerilla Cricket and courtesy of Ricky, of course. It's www.pontingwines.com.au/Guerilla Cricket, www.pontingwines.com.au/Guerilla Cricket. Ashes 2023 will be the code you need to get that fantastic discount. The Ashes 23 is all lowercase. Ricky, we do have one last request for you. Next cricket club up for us for our Ashes wine tasting evenings, when we're actually doing an Ashes quiz linked to, we have a morning session, evening session, afternoon session, condensed into an evening to try different wines alongside yours. It's my local club. It's Claygate Cricket Club. I would be chuffed to bits if you could just do a little message for Claygate Cricket Club, just to say, wishing them well for their Ashes wine tasting and for the rest of the season from yourself. It would be awesome. Claygate Cricket Club it is. Over to you.
Hi everyone at the Claygate Cricket Club.
Claygate, that's it.
Claygate Cricket Club. Ricky Ponting here. Just wishing you all the best for the upcoming Ponting Wines tasting event you've got coming up at your club. Unfortunately for you English guys, that you lost the first test, and I'm pretty sure you're going to lose the second one as well. But all the best with that. Enjoy the wine tasting. I'm sure you'll enjoy what Ponting Wines can bring to you in that bottle. And all the best for the remaining test matches of the summer. Have a good one, guys. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Ricky. You've been a great sport
awesome.
today. We've loved chatting to you. It's been great fun. Hope you've enjoyed it as well. Come and see us at Guerilla Cricket in Sydenham, SE26 London. If you ever get the chance, we'd love to have you along.
I just wrote that code down as well. I'm after this 15% discount.
He's been after us for giving his profit away.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks very much for your time. We've really enjoyed it. Cheers now.
Thanks.
Cheers, Ricky, awesome. Thank you so much, mate.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.
See ya.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Guerilla Cricket.
Revolutionary cricket commentary.